Hello, game devs. Today we're going to talk about what kind of jobs there are in the game industry, what kind of skills you should focus on, and hopefully taking an example of some people's portfolios out there. I will try to add links as well down below. But the easiest way to figure out what you need to do to get a job is to look at who is hiring and what jobs are out there. So the best way to do that is to go directly to the source and, Blizzard or whoever your favorite company is. If you really have a passion to work at that company, go check out their website. Start using their tools if they have any available to you. So like StarCraft Editor, or there's the Morrowind. Bethesda has the TES system to make stuff in Elder Scrolls and all that kind of stuff. So use the tools that you're passionate about. But if you're trying to track a scholastic education throughout your 4 years, it's good to take a look at what your goals are. And to do that, let's just talk about what kind of jobs there are out there. So I call this the ABCDs of disciplines. There are 4 categories. There's art, business, code, design, and sound. About 50% of any team makeup is usually the art department. Business and design take up kind of the smallest amount, probably about 10% each. QA departments do get a little large during testing, but the core management team behind that QA department is in the business area. And coders tend to be the second most hired department. And this is just the way games are made and the way content and, some companies have a variation on a lot of these kind of discipline areas. But let's take a look. So art specifically, we break it down into animation, 2D and 3D. And within those disciplines, in the 2D discipline, we have concept art. We have GUI and interface design. So this is also where like web interface people might be crossover. You might see this with designers or UI UX. This is some of the art side of the UI UX. There's also a lot of people who are into the design side. They tend to be over on the design team. Sometimes there's crossover as well. So, these are all malleable. Some people wear a lot of hats in studios, especially small ones. But these are kind of the roles that you have to fill for most games that you're going to work on. The 2D department, any artwork is usually split up between character and environment art. Environment art tends to be where a lot of people start doing prop modeling and then move on into the bigger backgrounds. The character art, they might start doing... I had one friend of mine who he used to like model left arms for a sports video game. That was his first 3D art for character art. So before he graduated into being able to make art to make bigger and more parts of the characters. So let's jump into taking a look at just an example. This is a job posting from Sledgehammer Games for a little bit. You'll see, I'm not going to read everything here, but we'll go through each bullet point and then we'll look at here the example. But we'll look through some of them here. So collaborate with the art director and concept artist to develop look and feel of assets. Manage a number of assets and prioritize tasks. Work with a technical art director. Maintain and share extensive knowledge. Maintain and share extensive knowledge pertaining to military gear. Receive feedback. Provide feedback. Follow schedules. Understand how 3D works. And there's some other technical parts about 3D. So a 3D character artist might look like this. This is Colby Jukes. And their work is really fantastic. We'll just look through a little bit here. There's a really good example of someone who is giving multiple looks, is able to break down what they're doing and provide detail. Also worked on some of the Halo stuff. We'll go to the Halo 5 Guardians, maybe the Prometheans. So this is what a character artist might be doing in the game industry. This is a 3D character artist specifically. So there are others, but this one is specifically for 3D. An environment artist. This one was a Double Fine position. You be able to understand architectural geometry and props for game environments and place models in game levels. Sculpting high resolution meshes, generating clean and organized. This is just some technical stuff. Assist the lead environment artist and the art director to achieve a consistent feel across all environments. That'll be actually one of the things you'll notice a lot. Is that you need, as an artist, to be able to be consistent with the other members of your team. And that's one really valuable aspect of any artist, to be able to work with a team. And that too, if you haven't noticed, that's starting to become a trend too, right? Collaborate with the game designers and art director to create visually stunning levels. Collaboration is one of the really important things. This is Lisa Lau. Her environment work is really fantastic. Doing some statue work. And this really just needs a good understanding of lighting. Typically, all artwork does need to understand lighting, but specifically for architecture, and being able to make a scene and bring it together. So that's one example. I also have another example. I should be closing these down, otherwise they're going to start to run my system. This is Mark Ferrari. He is a fantastic artist. His work is in Loom and in Secret of Monkey Island. He also worked on a bunch of the Spyro games. And one of my favorite things about his website is that there is this palette shifting example of tools that he did. So this is just some examples of utilizing palette shifting, which is an old 2D technique to make it look like it's animating, even though it's not. He is a top-notch artist, amazing artist. So take a look through some of the work that he has created. There's a bunch of stuff in here. It's actually something that I try to utilize in later homeworks. But yeah, this is really just brilliant. As you can see on the right hand, this is what the palette shifting means. Basically what it means is that there's like one spot where a color value is the same, and then we're just changing which spots have which colors. It's really, a really fun thing. So that's how we used to animate long time ago. Actually, let's go to Christopher Radsby. His work is also environment work. This is Tom Clancy, the Division. He really puts a lot of work into creating nice screenshots of what areas are laid out. Some of this is 3D environment artist work as well. So, that there's tagged right here, but then some of it is, I think, more of a level layout and level design stuff. So, people, depending on where you're at in the video game development process, I'm sure that there's a lot of work that's to be done. I'm not sure if he laid everything out here, but I would assume so. So then we have a concept artist. Concept artists. So this position does exist, but I'd like to say that probably not a lot of them exist. This one is from Pocket Gems. And if you notice, it's very limited. Create a variety of characters, work with the art director, work in conjunction with a 3D character artist to create high quality stuff. This is actually pretty typical because a concept artist has to be very good at drawing every single style possible. They have to be really good at working with developers and with like CEOs and other like marketing executives who like they don't know what they want necessarily, or they can't express exactly what they want, and they might even give you references that send you the wrong way. So there's a lot of work doing concept art that everyone does as a team member, usually on the work that they end up performing afterwards. But the concept artists do exist as a full-time job as well. You have to have veins of ice, water. You have to be really chill personality in order to handle sometimes really different expectations and moving goalposts often. Dominic Sedano, he's a fantastic 2D artist. He works on Plants and Zombies, Heroes, PopCap. He used to work on a lot of different stuff, but this is a fantastic example of really great concept artwork, doing multiple comps, that kind of thing. You can go to his website. It's really full of good work. He's also an animator, and like there's some UI and icon work here as well. So sometimes you're asked to do double duty. There's also Joseph Cross. This is a concept artist that's a little bit more, for Destiny, something a little bit more of what you might see for some of the more AAA studio game stuff, some of the like high budget things. Here's a Bungie Destiny bit he did. So there's, and one of the things you'll notice, take a look at this. So one thing concept artists are going to always be doing is creating multiple versions of the same thing, because you're trying to get like, I like 1, 3, and 5, but I think 4 and 2 or whatever are, out of scope, or not the same style. It helps narrow down the thing. So you're going to be throwing out a lot of work, and that's also something that can be kind of devastating to some young artists. You throw out a lot. This is Jesse Van Dijk. I apologize if I pronounce your name wrong. This is some more Destiny artwork, some more environment concept art opposed to character concept art. And, most of the time there's someone who specializes in one over the other. I don't know Jesse's technique here, and whether or not they are doing photoshopping, like with taking existing photos, or they're doing a lot of it from them on their own, but it's really amazing looking work. So you have to produce things really fast too. That's one of the really important things, is make it quick and seamless to turn around and show to other people. So a technical artist, this is something that this is a Unity technical artist, pushing Unity to reach the highest possible fidelity bar, help identify general workflow problems in Unity, and help invent and implement solutions to solve them. You must know scripting and art tools, C#, Photoshop, and a minimum of one 3D modeling tool, knowing additional tools such as Houdini, ZBrush, experience with particles. So a technical artist, what they do is they're like a programmer that programs art stuff specifically. They need to have an understanding, like, for instance, when you're making a cell shaded game, right? Someone has to program that cell shader, and to make it look the way it's supposed to look. And who does that? Well, this is John Sigro. He's a technical artist. There's not too much which you can show in technical art, because it's a lot about the background stuff, like how you create those kind of materials, and it's just everything in the game looks like that. But this is John Sigro. He worked for a good while on the Left 4 Dead series, and is also has been an adjunct with us before, and just really great guy all around. So you can take a look at that. So cinematic artists, I'm not going to click on all of these ones, but we've got, I'm just going to click on Ashley's at the bottom here. So a cinematic artist is someone who's going to be, might be even called a cinematic designer as well. It depends on the company. But a cinematic artist is someone who's going to be designing the cinematics, right? So a cinematic artist is someone who creates the, who does shot by shot work. Maybe it does some animation. This is Ashley Roll. She used to work at Telltale as a cinematic designer was her title. Artist, designer. Sometimes these things get mixed up. But Ashley worked on a lot of work and putting together all of the cutscenes and
where are
stuff.
Where are we even going?
But making sure that it's all timed, making these cameras flow, getting these animations together. This is a lot of work. This is a lot of custom work, and it's just like being a cinematographer and a movie director, but being able to really manipulate the puppets, the puppetry characters that we're working with. But also responsible for a lot of the storytelling. So check out their website, really cool. This is a Sledgehammer Games animator. So animators tend to be the people who make the things move around, and it tends to be someone who is different than the 3D modeling or 2D artist. You still might need to understand how art is created. That's very helpful. But I've noticed a lot of animators tend to have a less sophisticated. They have a less sophisticated understanding of how to do art most of the time. Although, like Dominic, he's an amazing 2D artist and amazing animator. So he just does both. So is Jason Weiser as well. He's a fantastic artist in many ways in 3D, but he came from animation. And here's a character animation for games reel that he did for Harmonix Dance Systems, Dance Central. And as well as some museum show stuff and some games. Dino Trucks, which was a game of his. Fantastic stuff. Oh, it looks like we got this animated. There we go. I'll mute that. So an animator's reel is usually a lot of YouTube or Vimeo links. They're able to create a bunch of animations, and then those animations are reused over and over. And they're often used on multiple characters. So like the same walk cycle will be the bad guy, the good guy, and everything in between. Yeah. So a VFX artist is like an animation person, an animator, someone who's creating the like sparkles or explosions. They're typically people who have a understanding of 2D art and a very strong ability to animate. And this is GameFX.WordPress. Andreas Glad. Andreas's work on Battlefield 4. So this is their VFX reel. I'll maximize this. So all the dust motes here, all the fire over here, the lightning, all this paperwork, these stormy experiences. All of this is stuff that, Andreas works on. This show reel is really fantastic, but this one I also like because it's mostly particle artwork with more of a 2D art game, trying to give some examples of high vis and some more cartoony stylized stuff. But like all of these explosions that are happening, all of this needs to be animated and created. Someone's got to do that. It's really fun stuff. You can do a lot of cool magical effects. A lot of the animations for Magic look nothing without their VFX. So a really important part of the industry. There's also UI artists. So this is a Monolith one. Designs and creates high quality UI components, menu icons, assists the UI programmer, collaborate. See that collaborate again, and communicate with art directors and game designers. There's a lot of that. Degrees in illustration, graphic design, industrial design or equivalent are good. This is Brandon Dix, and they do a lot of work. Checking out, this is just all UI work. So if you're doing 2D games, a lot of 2D games are very UI driven. This is all about menu work. My background was in human computer interaction, which is kind of the design part of it, how to design good interfaces. So just because you can draw an interface doesn't necessarily mean that it is a good interface. We've all run across a button that we didn't know what it did or why it was sitting there, or it did nothing. And so, there's some design that needs to happen, but that might happen from that position or from a designer who is partnered. It depends on how strong the UI person is. So the rest of the jobs don't really have examples too much about their portfolios. There's a couple designers, but the producers and coders, they don't really have as much. So there's two kinds of producers. There's the producer that is at the studio working on running the business development of the team, and then there are producers that work at publishing, like at Activision, or and there might be holding up, and they might be managing multiple products. So they will probably be a little bit more hands off, and they're more interested in coordinating marketing strategies, making sure that the team is paid and running on time. Producers, generally, their job is to make sure people get paid. Definitely one of the number one things they are there to do is to support the team. And they're also not, and they're also there to communicate a high level of vision. So this one's from CCP, and they're leading the team to develop the creative and overall vision of the game, but they're not developing the creative vision, right? So the producer's job is like to enable all of the creative people, and they might be creative too and might contribute in some way, but their main job is to produce, to create an environment that is really conducive to creative work. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to get people paid. But they do a lot of other stuff. This is part two of this position, a natural leader. This is for a senior position, expert communication and presentation skills, knowledge of typical producer software tools, budgets, project management. There's some software that you can learn, sense of humor. So we were talking about this before, proven ability to effectively partner with cross-functional disciplines, ability or able to influence effectively where there is no direct authority. So it's often important for you to be a cheerleader for your team. And it's sometimes about behavior. For instance, sometimes you could have a team member that might be, say, overly negative on a product, and it could be really bumming out the academic, or not the academic, but the gestalt of the or the vibe of the department that you're working in, the game project that you're working in, and the team might produce less because they might be more angry. So it sometimes is your job as a producer to do some interpersonal management and take people aside and say, hey, quietly and in private, it's always good to admonish in private, or critique in private, and then always applaud in public. But you might take them aside and you say, hey, it's really affecting the mood of the team. I'd like it if we could curb that, so that we can have a more effective environment. Sometimes that's kind of the interpersonal stuff, and it's kind of hard to do for some people. So there's also the publisher side game producer. This is to, and you can tell, track and manage inline process, assist with licensing, creative, A&R. There's a lot of legal work that goes in, produce, manage review processes, and you're also coordinating with a lot of stuff. And this is a really important job, because there's a lot of players, especially I was working on, Marvel and DreamWorks products. So that means that and it doesn't matter which product it is that I'm talking about, because it's always the same. We have a producer at the team who's developing it, who, is next to me on my next cubicle over. And then there is someone at, say, Sega or Activision. There's a producer, and they're working to get all of the games that are being made for this next movie that they're doing, and then there's the licensee, right? Like, just because Sega or Activision has the license to Spider-Man or Captain America doesn't mean they can do whatever they want with it. So they still have to check in and coordinate with Marvel. So they have to ask the producer over at Marvel. That's what game producers on the publisher side go into. Again, a lot of Excel, budget management, interpersonal work, be able to react quickly. There's also QA testers. This tends to be a really entry level position, although there are long-term management there's long-term and management level positions in QA, and a really good QA person. Some studios have a huge QA team that is mostly turnover with minimum wage or low wage. Then there are teams that decide to only hire in one or two at maybe a higher wage. There's a quality level that you'll get that's a change. But in general, QA people have to be very communicative. They have to be able to communicate upwards as well and be very methodical. And by upwards, I mean they have to communicate to people who are their superiors about problems that are happening in the game. That can always be really difficult if you communicate in a difficult way. And they also have to communicate. They have to tell the people who are creating games that there is something wrong with it. And, developers can sometimes be touchy because, they're artists in general. So it can be really important to communicate effectively without being overly obtrusive on, blame or anything. It's just really about fixing bugs, and, having a good QA team will make a smooth ship, and they'll find a lot of bugs as well. From programmers, just one more thing about QA. At one point we were working on Wolverine, and I was having difficulty 100%ing it really quickly. But our QA person at the time, he was super good. He could play and 100% the game twice as fast as anyone else. A really skilled QA person can really make everything faster, especially on those long build days. So there's also, in the programming section, there's a couple kinds of programmers out there. This one's from Roblox. There's an engine programmer. Engine programmers are creating, they're working on the engine. The engine is all the software that makes the game characters run. It's usually not the actual making of, we have 3 enemies and this enemy has a power or something. That's a different kind of programmer. This is more like, we want to make sure that the animation system plays one frame, then plays the next frame after a half a second or whatever the time is. So they're creating some of the very low level code that helps out that is the basis of how games are made. And it's really important to have strong code for your engines. This is usually deep level stuff. If you can take advantage of graphics hardware or other process hardware. So if you're really into comp sci or electronic science as well, those are really valuable skills to have. Like it says, multi-threading expertise. And then we've got network programmers. They tend to be the people who are able to get games to communicate and have players play with each other. Networking is an incredibly hard thing to do. If you're ever thinking about doing a multiplayer game, you have to have either dedicated networking support, or you have to be working with an engine that already has networking built in, and then you're beholden to that networking system. There's gameplay programmers. They tend to be the people who make the actual characters move around and the features in the game. Explosions explode that do damage, but only do damage to the player and don't destroy all the terrain nearby. That is all done. This one is from Sucker Punch. They use C++, but a lot of C# work as well. I would call what a lot of our intro to programming stuff, intro to scripting stuff is kind of gameplay programming. The stuff we're doing in Unity. There's also tools programmers. They're kind of like an engine programmer, but they might be creating separate tools that might be helping out setting up the server. We had one programmer at a company I worked at that they had the build, which is a computer that would create a executable of a video game file, and it would do it every time someone added something new to the server. And one of the things that we wanted to do was make a reporting system in case the build didn't work correctly. So one of our electrical engineers, they hooked up a stoplight that they found, like an actual sized stoplight, and then it would change colors to red, green, and yellow depending on the status of the build, which would alert all of us that maybe there's something wrong and that we had to look into it. So that was just a novel approach, but there's also an email that he could have set up as well, I guess. But I think that's a little less fun, don't you? So there's level designers. Level designers are people who are going to create interactive worlds. They're sometimes called level artists or environment artists. Valve typically requires you to be able to 3D model. This description is mostly about building the game world and using cinematic sequences, creating cinematic sequences. This is Jay Van Houten, which has really great examples of each part of the work, what they did on it, and tags, designed 20 puzzles, level decoration, puzzle mechanics, provides availability. And also, if you notice, again, with this crossover, level design VFX, Suicide Squad Special Ops. So some of the things that Jay did was, artwork as well. So you'll see that some people do that. And it's generally good to have as many skills as possible. So if you can think about working on some of those skills, do it if you have time. So there's also content designer, or a scripter it might be called. They tend to create interactions. So they might do cutscenes, but tend to do like waves of enemies but bursting through the windows, and then when you get 20 enemies killed, then another thing happens. All that takes some plotting and planning. They might also be implementing like quest systems if it's an RPG or that kind of thing. There's also writers in game design and game development. They tend to be in the game design field. There are game writing positions out there, which just tend to take a really strong writing background. But also, if you want to be there, getting the ability to implement your design, your scripting, and being able to implement your story work and your writing is really valuable. So you're going to want to come from an area, probably. There are a few writing positions out there. Monetization or economy designer. This is someone who's going to mostly work. I've noticed that this is mostly in the free-to-play freemium fields. This job is going to be more about like A/B testing, making sure that you can statistically derive valuable information about what is going to sell, what is going to be a hindrance to gameplay. Like if there's if this makes players stop returning to the game because it's irritating, that's really dangerous because they need to monetize their work. So this is about how to create money from free-to-play mobile games. Then there's the game designer or lead designer, the one with the ideas. This is someone who, it's hard to say exactly where they're from. It's, in fact, being from a diverse background is really valuable because it gives you a diverse set of ideas. But being someone who just creates games in any sort of either a niche or creates games just because they love creating games. So a friend of mine, Zach Barth, he is probably one of the most intelligent, if not the most intelligent guy I've ever met in terms of game design and development. He is extremely perceptive and methodical about the way he designs. So this is the work that he's been doing professionally. He made Eliza, Opus Magnum, Shenzhen, all of these work, Infinifactory, Space Chem, which is a project I worked very briefly with him on, Ironclad Tactics. So these are all just the professional games, if you've heard any of them. I also really love bringing up Zach because he has an archive page here. This was what he did in college. And if you want to look at what he did in college, like this is his blog. This is what it was. These were the games that started what he was doing. There's, Ruck Engineer here, Ruck Engineer 2. Those were definitely a series. One of my favorites, Gregor Mendel's Pro Botanist, Flight of the Atropos, which, he and I worked on way back when. This was a college project that he and I worked on. He did the majority of the work on that as well. He did, it was a really cool little thing, a little like, I'd say like a 4-player kind of like it's a 4-player game where each player would have a different part of the spaceship to control. It was really fun. So if you ever want to be inspired and have someone to look up to, take a look at this website. If you want to be a game designer in the big GD sense, then that's, take a look at Zach. So, and in general, game designers need to know just about everything: physics, math, literature, foreign language, learn film, learn acting, public speaking, marketing, learn geology, astronomy, ethnic studies, biology. No matter what game designer you are, you're going to be someone who is unique by bringing the things that make you unique to the work. And this is one of the reasons why I'm a big proponent of a diverse workforce, is because if you want to have really interesting games, you've got to have people who have ideas that you wouldn't have thought of. And everyone in the business school has always said heterogeneous groups create more ideas than homogeneous groups. Groups with only one set of thinking, and coming from different backgrounds allows you to engage differently. It's one of the ways that I've been able to work really effectively here in academia, because not everyone comes from a game development background. We're not all board game players the way I was at previous jobs, and it's really allowed me to think critically about what games mean and how to create an effective game. So there's also sound designers. They might be called sound engineers. There tend to be one or two of these on a team project. They are, this one's from Monolith. They create some sound effects. They may only be pulling it from databases. I worked a lot doing sound design and engineering. I downloaded sound effects from a database. When there weren't sound effects to be downloaded, I would generate them either from scratch by synthesizing them together using instruments, lots of different stuff. And my office now is scattered with a bunch of cheap musical instruments. A clarinet and is one of my favorite ones. Some of the more woodwinds, as well as guitars or whatever we need. So you generate what you need, and then you implement it using a system. There's Fmod, and this one's WWise. So it depends on what system you're using. I actually had to implement a lot of sound and some in a tool that was created by a tools programmer. So one other thing to take a look at is the game industry survey. So the 2014 one, the Gamasutra salary survey, tends to be one of the latest ones. And it's good to note, it's probably changed in 4 years, but the amount of money in comparison to others generally tends to be the same. And also this is highly skewed, like these are averages, but these are going to be highly skewed based off of the region you're applying in. So programmers tend to make one of the most with a $93,000 average salary. Again, lots of San Francisco developers, lots of Seattle developers, artists and animators on an average of 74. The starting salary is around 50,000. The starting salary is around 71,000. for programmers. That's a big $20,000 difference, especially if you're paying the same amount for student loans. But at the same time, there is the importance of passion and what work you want to do. But it is important to note, if you wanted to cross these and become a technical artist, you will get a big pay bump. So if you're an artist who's interested in adapting some programmatical skills, you should do so. Anyone knowing how to program a little bit's never a bad thing in the industry. Game designers have an average of 73,000. It's a little bit more, it's around the same as artists, but the entry level tends to be a bit higher, sometimes around the same. Producers also tend to be more experienced, so that's one of the reasons why this is higher average. There are also fewer of them, but the entry level is still 60,000 or so. So even, if you're just starting up as an associate producer, you're not going to be making the big bucks. There are audio professionals. Again, musicians tend to be contracted out of house. It's kind of like, some musicians can play one or two flavors, and not every game needs that. And also, musicians can generate music really fast. So this is mostly about the implementation people. There tend to be people on staff, though, who need to know how to make audio. QA testers tend to be the lowest paid, 38,000, or even sometimes minimum wage. And business management, of course, those are the people who are either running the business, somehow own the business. They'd of course be making more. So it's important to note that. And there's also been gender gap wage comparisons, which is important to note. There is, of course, also a gender gap in general in the industry, which is important to note when we're talking about those diverse voices. It's just something to be aware of. But it's also important to note that there are jobs all over the world, so you can go to the GameDev map here, and this is everywhere. And you'll see, there's a lot of people in the LA area, Siberia, the Siberian area, which can be no farther away from Connecticut. And so we see all over that this is Dunedin, Otago in New Zealand. I hope I pronounced that right. We've got companies in Lagos, Nigeria. We've got companies all the way up in Iceland, Siberia, and then Tokyo. So you can check out all the different companies. Obviously, the cities are going to be where you get paid more, but also are spending more on rent and that kind of thing. I worked upstate New York for a while. So that's the gist of the game industry. There are companies everywhere. It's a balancing act in terms of money. So as you're applying to jobs or thinking about jobs, you're thinking about also where do you want to live? What region do you want to live? You can take a look at all these companies, and they have job postings. This is an interactive website which has a lot of video game companies. Every single company will post the jobs to their website. This is the most effective way to search for jobs as well. Because a lot of them are listed here. All you have to do is go to their site, and then they'll have all the application data. So with that, I will see you in class.